Hello and welcome to the Lazier Man's Guide to School, where we teach you how to do better while doing less. Stay a while. You know, when I was young, I'd watch a lot of study YouTubers, and a lot of them were med students. And they'd give a lot of great advice, strategies, tips, and most of them my friends and I never end up using, to be quite honest. There's many reasons behind this. One of them is just that med students have so much more information that they have to learn than, say, a high school student or a college student. And it doesn't mean you need to do exactly what they do to be successful long term. So that's why we just did whatever was most comfortable to us. As you get older, there's more work you have to do. And I'd say today is probably the hardest I've had to work in my entire life. But it wasn't always this way, and it didn't have to be. In fact, I'd say in high school you shouldn't be studying just like a simplified version of what a med school student does. That's why this video is about providing a framework to success and doing less work, and more about mindset and broad strategy. Now, I'd say there's two broad classes of people that do well in school. One is the super methodical, 100% into everything, the quote-unquote good student that you typically think of when you think of good student. And then there's the student that also cares a lot and does well and isn't a perfectionist and just does so much less than the quote-unquote good student and still does well sustainably, and that's what we're about here. Anyways, for most of my life, my friends and I fell into that second category and we turned out just fine. In fact, a lot of these friends today are top of their class in top 15 med schools, working at FANG companies and making six figures. So it just goes to show there's no one way of studying that leads to success. I want to try to give you a couple tips and pointers and mindset things that will hopefully be more implementable, that you'll actually be able to apply to your studies, and it won't just be like, oh, work harder or something like that. And I want to be fully honest with you guys to tell you some of the things that us slightly lazier people did, so you see the other side of doing well that isn't like being a perfectionist. And I hope you see the big picture, and if you hear something that you can probably implement into your own studies, go ahead and do that. You're still going to work hard, but the point is that you work less hard than you have to. Now, we can get all the way in the weeds with this video, like when you should be doing what for certain types of homeworks and subjects, but I'm going to talk more about some of the broad concepts shared between all of us that hopefully you can apply. And if you're interested in a lazy man's guide to test taking, comment down below. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. 4 broad concepts, one specific type of mindset that's very important to have, and let's get straight into it. Now, before we start all of this, you need to have this mindset. Now, there used to be this saying that, and this was back when people still played World of Warcraft, and it was that you know you like World of Warcraft a lot when World of Warcraft is disrupting your life. But you know you're addicted to World of Warcraft when life is disrupting you playing World of Warcraft. And that's the same thing when it comes to being a student. Like, you're a student first. You're not someone who's like an Olympian who has to train for their sport and happens to have to go to school, you know what I mean? You're a student first. At this age, you're not someone whose goal in life is just to have fun and school gets in the way of that. You're someone who has to go to school and also wants to have fun. Sometimes school is annoying, but you have to do that first. I find that if you don't have this mindset and this identity, sometimes it can be really hard to get yourself to study. Now, the first huge idea is, what is laziness? A lot of people like to envision laziness as just not wanting to do anything, like lethargy or something. And sure, I guess that's being lazy, but that type of laziness is what gives laziness a bad rap. I like to think that laziness is where if everyone has to get to the same end goal, you take the shortest, sustainable path of getting to that end goal. And a huge part of this idea of getting to the end point in the easiest way possible involves things like starting earlier and doing all the work. I know that this sounds really counterintuitive, but hear me out. First, let's talk about starting earlier. Through most of my schooling, I adhered to this idea called the shitty draft, where you start really early, but you just finish the assignment as quickly as possible, as roughly, as quote-unquote shittily as possible. Obviously not purposely making it shitty, but just as rough as possible. Think about like 11:59 procrastination vibes. Just move forward to like right after you get an assignment, or like pretty soon after you get an assignment. One, this makes it so that you don't have to stress about the assignment for the rest of the time that you have, because worst comes to worst, you have it somewhat done. And 2, you can be the judge of whether or not you need to put more time into the assignment later on. And 3, it gives you time to get some feedback. Let's say you're taking Orgo, for example. You can literally watch 2 10-minute videos on chirality before class. It'll take you 20 minutes, and that'll literally put you ahead for the next like 2 weeks of Orgo class, okay? To me, that's laziness. Now, number 2 is just do all the work. Now, let me tell you, this might sound so dumb when we're talking about like a lazier approach. No shit, you have to do all the work, but at the minimum, do all the work. And I say this because some people like to put 100% effort into some work and then literally not do any work. I'd say that you have to at least do everything. We all know some classes are bullshit, like in high school. A lot of people like to spark notes entire books, while other people would read the entire book, which takes a lot of time, especially if you read like a 600-page book or something like that. And they'd even take notes on the book. But what I did is, first I'd spark notes the book, so same thing as the lazy people did, right? But then I'd really quickly actually skim the book. I could speed read the book at like over 2 times the speed because I know the main idea and still pick up a bunch of these smaller details, right? This is the type of thing, you're doing the work at the minimum, right? You're actually reading the book, but because you took measures to make it easier for yourself, you do less work than someone that just straight up reads the entire book and takes notes on that. Once again, on the back end of things, when it was time for the people who just sparked notes in the book to take quizzes or essays, they would do really bad, unless they were lucky sometimes, or like they would kind of struggle to find actually good examples, while I was completely fine. Now, broad idea number 2 is all about diminishing returns, and it was probably my favorite concept in high school. Now, when it comes to work, I like to go by something called the 90% rule, because that was the cutoff for an A- when I was in high school. So basically, the 90% rule states that you do just enough work to where you think you can get a 90% on the assignment, and then you stop. Meaning, for example, let's say if by putting in 1 hour of work you get a 70, 2 hours of work you can get a 90, 3 hours of work you can get a 94, 4 hours of work you can get a 98. Some people would put in that 4 hours of work and get a 98. I would just put in up to that 2 hours and which was the 90 quality, and that's all I would do. Because to me, that was the point where the returns started diminishing and it wasn't worth it to put in more time. This was only when it came to doing anything other than taking a test or a quiz. When you take a test or a quiz, you still want to try your best. Now you might be like, why are you aiming so low? Always aim high, right? You have to aim to the max. But the thing is, the 90% rule teaches you a huge thing about, one, efficiency and prioritizing. Well, a lot of times when it comes to taking notes or doing projects or stuff like that, making things look pretty takes just as much time as having good content. And so to get that 98 or 99, right, it takes adding aesthetics, adding little details that do add a little bit overall, but would just take exponentially more time than if you had a solid content base and you made things simple, right? So I began to realize that you could not skimp on the content. All you had to do is skimp on the aesthetic part and making things look really nice and still get over a 90% probably. Because even if your poster or something like that is super simple, they're not going to give you a 0 out of 10 on your aesthetic portion. They might give you a 6 versus the other guy's getting a 10, but just for 4 extra points, you might have put in an entire extra hour. Is that worth it? To me, it wasn't. But anyways, the point is, by following the 90% rule, I sort of realized that you get into the mindset that looks don't matter that much when it comes to school. Only personality does. I'm just kidding. But the point is, you want to focus on getting your content to be good, which normally takes equally as much time as the aesthetic portion of things, but is way more worth it to focus on. So the 90% rule really just teaches you about efficiency, prioritizing what's important, and stopping when you need to, so you don't overwork yourself. Now, broad idea number 3 is what I like to call only if it helps you. First of all, I would just like to say that a bunch of school, the younger you are, the more school is filled with BS. The older you are, the less of it is filled with BS. But in school, when deciding what you want to try on and what is not worth trying on, the only question I need to ask myself is, do I feel like it will actually help me learn or not? For example, let's say I had to write a few sentences for vocab, because for the weekly vocab words or something like that, that I never felt like it helped me at all. I would BS that so fast. I would do it during lunch, just write whatever random sentences, and it didn't matter to me. They could give me a lower grade on it. It didn't matter because it didn't help me at all, right? If I was doing practice problems, on the other hand, for the most part, they did help me learn, so I would spend a little bit more time on the practice problems, right? But let's say we had the same type of practice problems 2 days in a row, and the first day I felt like it already helped me enough, and I knew the thing I was really solid with the concept. The second day's practice, I would just BS that because I already knew it from the first day, and the second days didn't help me as much as the first day. We already passed the point of diminishing returns, right? But a lot of school is really just busy work, so it's important that in order to save time and do as little as you need to, you ask yourself, is it helping me? If not, just BS it so it gets done. Yeah, I know sometimes it will hurt your grade a little bit, but you could be spending that time on things that actually help you more, like quizzing yourself on the content, studying for the test, doing practice problems, and then on the back end of things, I like to really talk about back end, you know? On the back end of things, it'll help you get a higher test score than if you were just like spending a lot of time doing your busy work, homework, and it actually helps you end up getting a higher grade than if you spent 100% effort on everything. Speaking of only if it helps you, a huge thing I want to just talk about is that it doesn't make you a better student to walk through the motions of what better students do. For example, waking up at 5 a.m., using an iPad, taking better looking notes. If you're just doing these things because you see other better students doing them and you think it's gonna help you, it's not, okay? It's only when you see a problem in your life and these things possibly can fix those problems that they will help you. I've always slept at like 2 a.m. in my life. I've never used an iPad until med school because there was no purpose. I took the ugliest notes, and that really didn't matter to me at all because the way I preferred studying this just wasn't something that was necessary, right? It didn't make a difference to me. So when finding ways to improve your studying, you don't just default to doing what other people are doing, right? Stick with what you find has been working for you, and if things aren't working, that's when you modify them. Don't just add random things into your study routine just because you see smarter people do it. Add them only if they help you. Now, idea number 4 is about time management. And I was never that strict with my time management now until med school because there's just so much work. But even high school, college, did not really have any sense of serious time management. And so I would say if you're in high school or if you're in college, if you're in that general age group, there's no need to be like a fucking Grinch with your time. You have enough time. In fact, all of high school I just spent a lot of time watching TV because it's more important that you enjoy your time that you're spending rather than hating your life and being very productive or whatever. So that's why most of high school I did something I like to call anime doro. I never called it that back then, and I started off using sitcoms. I'll leave the card for the video up there, right? But in general, when managing time, when it came to assignments and projects, I would start them really early, do a rough job. Tests, I would start looking over roughly a week before. Homeworks, I would do as much as possible during lunch and then just finish them after I like took a nap or ate a snack after coming home. If you do this, you can be pretty loose with your time and still be completely fine. If you're in high school, you only really need to do like 2 to 3 hours worth of work and you'll be completely fine if you follow the principles up above. And speaking of timing, the first month you're in school is really not the time to be lazy. You want to try your best, you want to give a good impression to your teacher, have all your cards in order, and that's because of something called the halo effect, right? It means that if your teacher thinks you're smart and you're hardworking, they'll be nicer when they grade you with everything, and you won't have to work as hard, and they'll still think that you're a hard worker. I could tell you for a fact that this happened, even though it's not the best thing that happened. But because I started the school year off really strong, literally by the end of the school year, or even the middle of the school year, I could turn in the same exact thing as someone else and I would get a higher grade than them because the teacher was just like, oh, Josh is a good student. As things progress and you sort of understand where you have wiggle room and where you have leeway, that's when you can be much quicker to cut things out that you don't find helpful and that you don't want to do. But like, I'd say the first month of school is not the time to be slacking off, not the time to be lazy. video and you might be like, oh, this is a framework for how to do less in school, but you didn't really tell us how you should be studying in school. There are no study strategies. There are really only 3 things you need to know about studying. One is just do as many practice problems as you can. That's a non-negotiable. Number 2 is be able to explain any topic you're learning in detail without looking at your notes, without looking at anything. Just spit out as much information as you know about it, and then when you realize you don't know something about it, look it up and then restart your explanation. And then look at questions, try to explain them, and then realize that you don't know how to explain them, look up the answer, and then start over and try to explain them again afterwards. And then the third thing you need to know is that you need to make sure you look over your information at least 3 times. Let's say if you're doing a pre-reading, then you're learning in class, and then you're reviewing 1 time before the test, that's 3 times. Or let's say you're just learning in class, looking over the material 2 days after, and then right before the test, that's also looking it over 3 times. You have to look over everything a minimum of 3 times. Now, the better you get at this process, the more extraneous stuff you can drop, to the point where like you can literally take no notes and not be doing anything in class, literally just making sure you're doing these 3 things and you'll be 100% fine. Hopefully this video shows you a little that you don't need to be a perfectionist, right? You don't need to be a perfectionist to do well in school. In fact, it's probably better not to be a perfectionist to do well in school. You do need to know what to focus on. You need to be a little bit disciplined at the minimum to start things at certain times. But when it actually comes to how hard you try on things, you can adjust your effort accordingly. Hopefully it was helpful, and as always, if you liked the video, like, comment, subscribe. And if you're interested in seeing a lazy man's guide to test taking, which is something I'm much more qualified for and will probably be a better video than this one, comment down below. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.